Okay, so now we're going to talk about the four styles of Roman painting, which is also sometimes called the four styles of Pompeian painting. I think Roman painting is more apt because this kind of painting style was not just done in Pompeii. We just have the best preserved examples of it from there. Okay, so Pompeii and the surrounding towns have given us the most complete record of the changing interior design styles in the ancient world. So this is kind of discovered by, not discovered, but it put in a context altogether and understood as these changing styles instead of just isolated frescoes being looked at independently by a guy who's a archaeologist, and his name was August Mann. He was German. He lives from 1840 to 1909, and so up until this point, as these were being discovered and unearthed in Pompeii, archaeologists were cutting the individual frescoes out and taking them away to museums to study them. And August Mann was one of the first people to be like, maybe we should look at these in a context together and kind of look at the evolution of painting in this empire. Okay, so prosperity. Rome is stable as an empire for a long time. And so there is time for people to make more money and be more prosperous, and also pay for more lavishly designed things in their houses. It's quite a thing to have multiple custom murals in one house. A lot of the houses that are preserved in Pompeii had this kind of level of painting in every room of the house. So it's pretty fancy, very expensive kind of thing. The technique, this is a fresco technique called fresco buono, which means true fresco. Fresco means fresh. Fresco secco, which we've seen previously, literally translates to fresh dry. Fresco is a painting technique that involves plaster. If you wait until it's dry, that's fresco secco, and then you paint on it. That's one technique. Fresco buono is when you paint into the plaster when it's wet, okay? So then the paint fuses and becomes part of the wall. These are in fresco buono, which holds up really well historically, but also they have the additional level of being preserved by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, right? Okay, so sometimes the plaster is also mixed with marble dust, which is very expensive, but it adds a little bit of a shine to it. Okay, so the first style of this Roman painting is kind of like faux finish. I always tell my students in seated classes, it's kind of like the 1990s in the Midwest in America, when everybody's mom kind of did the fake Tuscan style, like sponge painting of the wall, so it looked like a Mediterranean style house in the kitchen, and maybe painted little ivy vines or different things like this. That's kind of what the first style of ancient Roman painting is like. It's creating the look of different kinds of stone, okay? So making the walls look like they're made out of different kinds of stone. The second style is this imaginary 3D world gets painted, and it's kind of the opposite of first style. So first style looks like you have really solid walls made out of stone. Second style looks like there's these windows that look out into gardens or look out into architectural landscapes. Sometimes there'll be subjects from mythology incorporated in there. Third style is delicate linear work and is mostly monochromatic, so much more simple than second style. And then fourth style is very similar to second style, except instead of just having your normal architectural vistas and things like you have in second style, these are totally unrealistic, very fantastical sorts of buildings that don't really make a whole lot of sense. And then they'd be interspersed with other things like portraits, like illustrations from mythology, and things like this. Okay, so let's look at these more closely. Oops. Okay, first style. First style looks like this. This is from Herculaneum, which is right next to Pompeii, and is the same situation, was also destroyed by Vesuvius, but was very well preserved. So in here, in this entry room, we have walls that are plaster, but they're all painted to look like different kinds of stone. So you can see like this is to look like Prado marble, which is the green marble from central Italy. This is to look like white marble. This is like the red Egyptian kind of sandstone that's used. So basically everything is made to look like it's made out of all these expensive stones. And when they'd put the marble dust in with the paint and mix it into the plaster, they'd wait for it to dry and then polish it, so it really would have originally looked like it was a stone surface made out of different kinds of stone. So that's first style. First style is pretty easy. I feel like we've got that. Okay. Second style has a lot of variables. This is kind of not a super typical depiction of second style, but I really like this fresco. I think it's really interesting, and the story behind it is interesting, so I'm going to share it with you. First style sticks around for a bit, but after 80 BC, a new thing becomes popular. This is probably a Roman invention, and it's this imaginary 3D world that dissolves the walls. So it's kind of like you could walk out into these different scenes. Sometimes there's narrative scenes from mythology, like this one. Sometimes they are architectural vistas you can see outside. Sometimes they are enclosed gardens like this. These are all second style, different variations on it. Okay, so let's look at this one first. This is from the Villa of Mysteries. So each of these houses is named after a prominent feature of the house. This one's called the Villa of Mysteries because of this painting. This is a Dionysiac mystery frieze. So Dionysus is the Greek god of wine and kind of partying. His name is Bacchus in Rome, but there's this fascination with ancient Greece in Rome. So a lot of these mythological subject matters are actually referencing Greece, not their own immediate culture of Rome. So basically this is a room that was used to celebrate the rites of Dionysus. This is this kind of popular religion that's called a mystery religion. It reminds me of Victorian era England and the east coast of the United States, where people got really into mysticism and doing like seances and things like that. This is kind of like that. It's like this particular like kind of focused practices that relates to the religion at large of the gods and goddesses, but is a little bit wackier, let's say, okay? So they have their own special kind of rites and things. So this room would have been used for this. It's very, very popular, particularly among wealthy women. Same thing as in the Victorian era, where you have seances and mysticism, also popular with wealthy women, societal women. Okay, so let's look at what's happening here. We have this woman with wings. She is whipping this semi-nude woman. We have women imitating Ariadne, who is Dionysus's bride. We have Dionysus in the center here. We have this man holding a mask. We have people drinking. We have people in stages of undress. So all kinds of wild stuff is happening. What's interesting to us, from a painting perspective about this, is we have these figures, and you'll notice their feet and legs cross over the boundary of the picture frame of the wall. So it's supposed to look like we've dissolved this wall and you could actually walk out and interact with these figures. Okay, let's look at a slightly more typical version. This is from Boscoriel, which is also nearby Pompeii, same kind of situation. And this is mature second style paintings. So we have three-dimensional looking settings that are meant to look like you are looking out windows into the world outside. So we have architectural elements painted in here. We have an attempt at accurate linear perspective to make it feel like you really could walk out into these courtyards and temples that are depicted. We also have some vegetation and things painted in here. So this is meant to kind of dissolve the walls and be like you could walk out into this area. This was the villa of Publius Fannius Sinistor, and these frescoes actually have been completely lifted out of the space and are now at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. There's a whole wing of that museum where you walk through and there's like different rooms from history. It's kind of fascinating. Anyway, okay. A lot of people credit this one-point perspective and linear perspective as being something that is kind of invented in the Renaissance. We actually see it being developed here in Rome in this style of painting, and is fairly accurate. They get pretty good at it. The Greeks used it before in stage designs, set designs for performances, and so the Greek name for it was skenographia, which means scene painting. So linear perspective we see used a lot in second style painting. Many rooms did not have windows, so this was a way to kind of make picture windows, to make fake windows within the rooms. This is another example of second style, a different kind of interpretation of second style painting. So this is called Prima Porta, and this is the villa of Emperor Augustus's third wife, Livia, who was also one of his most trusted advisors, so Octavian Augustus's third wife. This was a barrel vaulted room, and the painters create this illusion of a lush gardenscape. So if it's raining and yucky outside, no fear, you can hang out in your lush gardenscape inside. And there's a couple of interesting things about this. One is, again, if you look at the treatment of the wall here with the plants sitting inside it, we can see attention to one-point linear perspective, which is fairly accurately done. Then on top of that, we have also use of atmospheric perspective, which is where things in the distance of a painting are a little bit blurrier, a little bit cooler in color, a little bit hazier to make it look like it's further in the distance. This is also something that's credited as a Renaissance invention. It's actually often credited to Leonardo da Vinci and his sfumato, smoky kind of painting, but we can see that this is actually being created in 30 to 20 BC in second style painting. This reminds me a little bit of the Acrotiri, the spring fresco on Thera, because here we have this lush gardenscape, but we don't have any human figures, we don't have any animals, we don't have anything that's didactic, teaching us a lesson or anything like this. It's just a landscape, so it's purely decorative. Okay, this is third style. Third style is funny to me. So one of the things that you notice in fashion and in interior design and different trends in general is that things kind of go back and forth. Something is out of style, then it's back in. Wide leg jeans, skinny jeans, you know, back and forth, this kind of thing. Okay, so as a response to the kind of over-the-topness of this, of second style, we then see third style come along, and it's sort of much more muted, much more subdued compared to second style. So we have delicate linear work. We have no real imitating of stones or anything like in first style. It tends to be monochromatic, so this is all painted pretty much just this kind of dark plum purpley color. It's not really showing us a realistic view of the outside world, so it's not trying to create the illusion of windows or gardenscapes like we see in second style. But we do see these interesting little stylistic oddities. So this is from the villa of Agrippa Postumus. This is the cubiculum, which is the bedroom, basically. And if we look at these little linear lines, if you look closely, they aren't just lines, they're little bitty colonnettes. So they have little volutes, they have little capitals on top of these. So they're just like super thin, stretched little columns, little colonnettes, which is very strange. And they're supporting things like this very delicate canopy, which is sort of the shape of a pediment, but not quite. So taking these known architectural elements from classical Greek architecture and kind of like messing with them and making them non-functional and decorative, and then painting representations of them. The other thing that you see is you have this kind of architectural frame made by these little colonnettes and this sort of canopy, and then in the middle of it you'll have these little tiny paintings like this, which is this funny little tiny floating landscape painted on the wall, and it's of like a garden with like a little ruin of something, a little like ruins of an old temple or structure or something. So it's kind of an odd thing. Vitruvius, who's the guy who writes the 10 books of architecture, which is a very famous work about architecture, hated this style of painting. He writes this kind of intense diatribe of the style of painting, saying it's taking classical architectural elements and bastardizing them, basically. So it's not everyone's favorite. Okay. The fourth style is easy to get confused with the second style. This really comes on the scene in 50 CE. And this, we have architectural vistas again, like second style, but these are totally unrealistic, fantastical buildings, and they don't line up. So like from one window, painted picture window, to the next, it's not the same thing happening on the outside world. So the illusion is not as realistic as with second style. This is called the Ixion room. This is from the House of the Veti from Pompeii, which we kind of looked at their house earlier in an earlier lecture. This is from the Triclinium, which is the dining room. And so we have these weird made up kind of fake vistas, architectural vistas, and then we also have images from mythology. So we have this complex multi-color composition. It combines all of the styles and makes them more elaborate. Up at the top here we have some first style faux painting with faux balconies and faux stone. Then this is a story from mythology. So this is Ixio was he was the king of the Lapiths, I think. Anyways, he's the king of this ancient tribe, and he tries to seduce Hera. So this is a Greek myth. So Hera is Zeus's wife. She's the queen of the gods, and Zeus cheats on her constantly. But someone tries to seduce her, and Zeus freaks out and is like, absolutely not. And so here's Hera looking bored and kind of irritated and like rolling her eyes. Here's Zeus. He comes down and is like, you will not be with my wife. So he ties Ixio to a wheel, and the wheel just perpetually spins forever. And that's his punishment. Okay, for trying to seduce Hera. Well, like what you would want in your dining room, right? Kind of an interesting choice. Okay, so although the paintings have Greek myths as the subject, they are not necessarily direct copies of existing paintings. So they're like, there's a lot of Roman sculptures that are copies, direct, exact copies of Greek sculptures, but this like is an interpretation of writing of Greek mythology, but it's not a direct copy of a painting that existed before. Okay, other things that we have going on that are well preserved in these cities around Vesuvius are mosaics. So we have mosaics on walls, floors, and ceilings. This one is in the summer triclinium, so the outdoor dining room of a house in Herculaneum. So this was actually above a water feature in the outdoor dining room, and this is a mosaic portrait of Neptune and his wife, Amphitrite. Neptune is Poseidon. He's the Roman version of Poseidon, so the god of the sea. And his wife, Amphitrite, is there next to him. So this is a mosaic. We looked at Greek mosaics that were made out of little pebbles, remember? So this is a Roman mosaic that's actually made out of tessera, which are little individual tiles that would have been individually glazed and painted, so they had more control over the color that was used. Okay. We also see some other developments in painting at this time that are pretty new. So this is a portrait of a couple who lived in a house, so it's just a domestic portrait of them. And it kind of makes sense given the custom of keeping these wax imagines that we talked about when we were talking about the Republic. It's not surprising that portraits were popular. So this is just a painted portrait that would have been a fresco that was part of their part of a fourth style wall, right? So this is a married couple. She's holding a stylus. That's to show that she is literate and educated, which not that many women were at this time. He's holding a scroll with a seal, likely their marriage scroll. So we see some portraiture of individuals who aren't necessarily you know, emperors and leaders and things like that. They're not gods and goddesses. They're just kind of normal people. So portraiture becomes a thing. We also have things like this. This is kind of my favorite. It's so weird. So Rarer are portraits of famous men and women. So this is Menander. So Menander was a Greek comedic poet. He's credited as the first person to write a new comedy, so not a reinterpretation of a myth or something, but a truly original piece of comedic writing. He wrote 108 comedies. He took the prize at the Lanai Festival 8 times, but his work is almost entirely lost to history except for a few fragments. What I like about this is basically this was their favorite comedian. This is their favorite writer, and they had a portrait of him painted as a fresco in their house, which is kind of like hanging a poster on the wall. So like if you had a poster of like, I don't know, John Mulaney on the wall in your dining room, this is the equivalent of that in Rome, which I think is kind of funny. On the opposite wall, there's a portrait of a man holding 2 theatrical masks, which many historians think was supposed to be Euripides. So they had their favorite, like, famous writers up on their wall. Okay, so we also see paintings like that, though they are rarer. This is a fascinating thing to me as a painter myself, because the late Northern Renaissance gets the credit for kind of inventing the still life painting. Also becomes very popular in the Northern Baroque period. But actually, we have what is likely a still life in a Fort-style wall painting in Herculaneum. So here's some unripe peaches and a vase, a glass vase with water in it, which certainly looks like a still life to me. So we can see the shadow work and the highlight work. It very much looks like a still life painting, which is pretty cool because it's about 2,000 years earlier than when we thought that this was a thing. Not quite that early. 1,400 years earlier. Okay. All right. So pretty neat that there is the Roman invention of still life paintings as well. We don't really see this again until the Renaissance. Okay, next time we'll return to our chronological look at things, so we'll go and talk about the early empire.